In the shadowed cradle of the eternal forest, where moonlight bled through ancient pines like silver veins, a single howl pierced the night, not of triumph, but of a soul adrift between worlds. The Alpha King, Elias Thorne, moved through the underbrush with the grace of a predator who had long forgotten the thrill of the hunt. At over 5 centuries old, born in the mist-shrouded highlands of 16th century Scotland to a pack of shapeshifters who revered the moon as both mother and merciless judge, Elias carried the weight of immortality like a crown of thorns. His origin was one of fire and loss, orphaned during a clan war where rival wolves tore his family apart under a blood moon. He had clawed his way to kingship through battles that left scars deeper than flesh. Traumas lingered in his golden eyes, eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the betrayal of lovers who withered while he endured. His desires were simple yet profound: to forge a legacy beyond solitude, to protect the vulnerable remnants of his kind, and to atone for the lives he had ended in the name of survival. Ethical to his core, Elias ruled his hidden pack with a code of honor, shunning the wanton violence of lesser alphas, yet guilt haunted him like a persistent fog. He was a king marked by the ghosts of those he could not save, a wolf who chose eternity not for power, but to guard the fragile light of his people. Tonight, the air hummed with unease. The pack's territory, nestled in the fog-veiled valleys of modern-day Appalachia, whispered of intrusion. Elias's heightened senses caught it first, a faint, acrid tang beneath the damp earth and pine resin. Human sweat mingled with something warmer, more vital. Blood, not spilled in violence but pulsing with life. He shifted seamlessly from man to wolf, his massive form, black fur rippling over muscles honed by centuries, slipping through the trees toward the edge of the human world. The diner squatted on the outskirts like a relic from a bygone era, its neon sign flickering, moonlit haven against the relentless patter of rain on the tin roof. Inside, the air was thick with the sizzle of grease and the low murmur of late-night patrons, truckers nursing coffee, locals drowning sorrows in pie. Amid the clatter of plates and the hiss of the grill stood Leora Voss, a human waitress whose life had unraveled like thread from a frayed tapestry. Leora was 32, born in the rust-belt decay of a Pennsylvania mill town to parents who toiled in factories until the machines claimed their health and spirits. Abandoned by a husband who fled when their child was born with a rare congenital disorder. Brittle bones that shattered with the slightest mishap. She now navigated existence on the razor's edge of despair. Her traumas were etched in the hollows of her cheeks. The endless hospital visits, the pitying glances from strangers, the nights when pain kept her child, little Kai, awake with whimpers that echoed her own silenced screams. Desires burned quietly within her, to shield Kai from a world that saw him as broken, to reclaim a fragment of the joy stolen by illness, and to find solace in something, anything, beyond the grind of shifts that left her hands raw and her heart numb. Desiludida, she moved through her days like a ghost, her dark hair tied back in a practical knot, her uniform stained with the remnants of spilled soup. Kai, barely 2, was bundled in a worn carrier against her chest, his tiny body swaddled in blankets that smelled of antiseptic and lavender. He was no ordinary child. Unbeknownst to Leora, a twist of fate from a forgotten encounter in her youth had infused him with the wild essence of the wolf. A latent shifter's blood, diluted and dormant, manifesting now as a fragile hybrid, a disabled pup in human form whose cries sometimes carried an otherworldly edge. Tonight, as Leora balanced trays with weary precision, Kai stirred, his small hand clutching her collar, a soft whine escaping his lips that cut through the din like a distant howl. Elias froze at the diner's perimeter, hidden in the tree line, his wolf form's breath misting in the chill. The scent hit him fully then. Wolf blood, faint but unmistakable, woven into the human female's aura. His pack's future, abandoned? The thought ignited a fierce protectiveness, a king's instinct to reclaim what was his by right of bloodline. But as he watched her, Leora, though he did not yet know her name, cradled the child with a tenderness that pierced his armored heart. Something shifted. She was broken, yes, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion. But in her movements there was a quiet defiance, a refusal to yield to the shadows encroaching on her life. Rain drummed harder against the windows, blurring the glass like tears unshed. Elias shifted back to human form, his tall frame clad in dark leather that blended with the night, a silver ring on his finger, his symbolic anchor engraved with a crescent moon and a thorned rose, a relic from his lost mate centuries ago, catching the faint glow from the diner. He stepped forward, the door's bell tinkling like a warning chime as he entered. Leora glanced up, her hazel eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment. In that gaze, Elias saw not just a waitress, but a mirror to his own solitude, a mortal teetering on the brink, carrying a secret that bound them across the veil of worlds. She turned away, serving a plate with mechanical grace. But Kai's eyes, bright and unnaturally keen, locked onto the stranger, a soft growl rumbling in his throat, too low for human ears. The Alpha King took a seat at the counter, the wood creaking under his weight. "Coffee, Black," he said, his voice a low rumble like thunder rolling over hills. As she poured, their fingers brushed, and in that touch, eternity brushed against fragility. Leora felt a warmth she hadn't known in years, a pull that both terrified and beckoned. Elias inhaled deeply, the scent of the child confirming his suspicion. This was no ordinary abandonment. Kai was Pack, his blood calling home. Introspection gripped Elias as he sipped the bitter brew. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die, yet here he sat, confronted by a human whose suffering mirrored his own ancient wounds. The rain outside softened to a whisper, candles on the counter flickering shadows across her face, light and shadow dancing in eternal conflict. He rationalized the attraction. Duty demanded he investigate the child. But deeper, in the chambers of his wolf heart, he felt the stirrings of something inevitable, a love resisted yet inexorable. As the diner emptied, Leora approached to clear his cup. "Last call," she murmured, her voice laced with fatigue. Kai fussed, his tiny body trembling, and in that moment, a revelation dawned for Elias. The pup's distress was no mere illness, but the awakening of his shifter nature, suppressed by human frailty. He reached out, not to touch, but to offer a steadying presence. "He's special," Elias said softly, his words carrying the weight of centuries. Leora's eyes widened, defenses cracking like frost under sun. In the quiet that followed, as thunder rumbled distant, Elias made his choice. He would not leave without answers. But as Leora gathered her things, Kai's cry escalated into a howl that shattered the night's fragile peace, drawing unseen eyes from the forest. The Alpha King rose, his shadow lengthening across the floor, knowing this encounter had already changed the course of his endless life, and hers. The rain had ceased, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and unspoken secrets, as if the forest itself held its breath for what was to come. Leora wiped down the counter with a rag that had seen better days, her movements deliberate, a ritual to anchor herself against the stranger's piercing gaze. Elias remained seated, his presence filling the empty space like smoke from a dying fire. The diner's clock ticked onward, its hands glowing faintly under the dim overhead light, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters on the checkered floor. Kai had quieted in her arms, his small chest rising and falling in uneasy rhythm. But Leora felt the weight of eyes upon them, Elias's golden stare, watchful and unnerving. She had always been alone in her struggles, piecing together a life from shattered fragments since Kai's diagnosis. The doctors spoke of genetic anomalies, of bones too brittle for the world's harsh touch, but Leora sensed something more, a wildness in her son's eyes that no medical chart could explain. Now, this man, tall, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of midnight and a face carved from enduring stone, stirred doubts she had long buried. "You said he's special," she ventured, her voice barely above the hum of the refrigerator. "What do you know about my son?" Elias leaned forward, the leather of his jacket creaking softly, a sound like old parchment unfolding. His mind raced through philosophies of existence, the mortal coil, so fleeting yet profound in its capacity for pain, versus the eternal vigil he bore. Guilt from his past, packs lost to human encroachment. Children like Kai abandoned at borders, fueled his resolve. "I've seen children like him before," he replied, choosing words with the care of one who had woven lies into truths for lifetimes. "Stronger than they seem, but they need protection from those who would exploit their differences." Leora's laugh was bitter, laced with the texture of exhaustion, like velvet worn thin. She adjusted Kai's blanket, feeling the warmth of his skin against her chest, the faint thrum of his heartbeat echoing her own accelerated pulse. Abandoned by her family after Kai's birth, her mother calling him a burden, before vanishing into the haze of remarriage, Leora had built walls of resilience, rationalizing love as a luxury she could ill afford. Yet Elias's words pierced them, offering a glimpse of understanding she craved. Outside, the moon emerged from cloud cover, its pale light filtering through grimy windows, illuminating the silver ring on Elias's finger. The thorned rose engraving seemed to pulse, a symbol of love's dual nature, beauty entwined with pain. He traced it absently, remembering the dhampir who had worn its twin, a half-vampiric woman whose romance with him had ended in tragedy, her choice of mortality leaving him scarred. No, he thought, this human was no dhampir, but the pull was similar, inevitable, resisted. A sudden gust rattled the door, and Kai whimpered, his body convulsing slightly. A seizure or something more primal? Leora panicked, cradling him closer. The scent of his distress sharp and metallic, like blood on the wind. Elias stood in an instant, his instincts overriding caution. "Let me help," he urged, his hand hovering near but not touching, respecting the invisible barrier of her distrust. In the intimacy of the moment, time slowed. The diner felt like a ruin, its faded wallpaper peeling like ancient skin, the air thick with the aroma of cooling coffee and rain-soaked asphalt. Leora hesitated, her dilemmas moral and raw. Trust a stranger with her child's fragility, or face another night alone? Elias saw the war in her eyes, the light of maternal ferocity battling the shadows of despair. Gently, he placed a hand on Kai's blanket, channeling a subtle alpha energy, a soothing wave that calmed the boy's tremors. Kai's eyes fluttered open, locking onto Elias with recognition, a soft yip escaping his lips, wolf to wolf. Leora's breath caught. In that touch, she felt a spark, not of magic, but of possibility, a redemption she hadn't sought. They spoke then, in hushed tones as the night deepened. Elias shared fragments of his life, tales of protecting the vulnerable, veiled references to his pack's code. Leora opened up, her voice trembling with the weight of untold stories. The husband's flight, the endless bills, the fear that Kai's condition would claim him before she could teach him to dream. Love, she admitted, felt like a curse binding her to suffering. As dawn's first gray light crept in, Elias offered a proposition. "Come with me, just for the night. There's a place where he can be safe." Leora rationalized it as desperation, but deep down, the inevitability tugged at her soul. The death that shadowed Kai's illness loomed larger now, personified in her doubts. Yet as she gathered her coat, a distant howl echoed from the woods. Pack members, sensing their king's delay. Elias's face tightened, the ritual of reunion calling him home. Leora paused at the door, Kai in her arms, the moon's reflection in a puddle like a shattered mirror of choices unborn. What if this stranger held the key to her son's survival and her own heart's resurrection? In that suspended breath, the weight of eternity pressed upon them both, leaving Leora to wonder if stepping into the unknown was salvation or surrender. Footsteps echoed on the gravel path leading from the diner, each one a deliberate crossing into the unknown, where the boundary between human frailty and ancient wildness blurred like mist at dawn. Leora followed Elias into the forest's embrace, Kai's weight a constant anchor against the chill wind that whispered through the pines. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches interlacing overhead to form a cathedral of shadow and silver light. She questioned her sanity, abandoning the familiar grind for the allure of a stranger's promise. But the sight of Kai sleeping peacefully in the makeshift carrier, soothed by Elias's earlier touch, silenced her doubts. Her life had been a tapestry of abandonment. Father lost to the bottle, mother to indifference, husband to cowardice. Desires for stability warred with the disillusion that safety was an illusion. Elias led the way, his stride measured, the textures of the night alive around them, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant hoot of an owl, the faint, earthy musk of moss clinging to bark. His mind churned with ethical quandaries. Revealing his true nature to a mortal risked exposure, yet the child's blood demanded it. Born a shifter in an era of superstition, Elias had chosen kingship after his pack's massacre, vowing never to let innocence perish. Guilt over past failures, abandoned pups left to human mercy, drove him now. The silver ring glinted on his finger, its thorned rose a reminder of love's redemptive curse. They reached a clearing where an old cabin stood, half ruined, its timbers weathered like bones exposed to time. Candlelight flickered from within, cast by pack members who emerged from the gloom, silent figures with eyes that gleamed unnaturally. Leora tensed. The air thick with the scent of wood smoke and something feral, like wet fur after a storm. Inside, the space was intimate, walls lined with shelves of ancient tomes and herbs, a fire crackling in the hearth that bathed everything in warm, golden hues. Kai stirred, his cries building to a feverish pitch, bones aching as if the shift within him clawed for release. Leora knelt by the fire, tears tracing paths down her cheeks, the heat warming her skin while despair chilled her core. Elias knelt beside her, his voice a soothing cadence. "He's one of us," he confessed, the words a revelation hanging heavy. "A wolf pup, born of mixed blood. Your encounter years ago, it bound him to my kind." Leora recoiled, rationalizing it as madness, but the truth resonated. A fleeting night with a traveler, dismissed as a dream, now manifest in her son's plight. The ritual began then, under the moon's watchful eye, visible through a cracked window. Elias guided her hands to Kai's sides, teaching her to channel calm through touch, while pack elders chanted softly, their voices a rhythmic pulse like distant heartbeats. The air hummed with energy, textures vivid, the velvet rub of fur against skin in visions that flashed before Leora's eyes, the metallic tang of blood from a ceremonial cut on Elias's palm, pressed to Kai's forehead. In that moment of choice, Leora faced her dilemma. Accept this supernatural bond, embracing a world of shadows for her child's life, or cling to human denial and risk his death. Pain and love intertwined, the fire's glow illuminating her tear-streaked face, a portrait of transformation. Elias watched, his own heart aching with the curse of eternity, watching mortals break, yet finding redemption in their resilience. Kai's cries subsided, his body relaxing as the latent wolf within found temporary peace. Leora looked up at Elias, vulnerability raw in her gaze. If this is real, what does it mean for us? The question lingered, intimate and profound, as the candles guttered low. But as peace settled, a shadow moved outside, rival shifters, drawn by the pup's call, their eyes red with hunger in the moonlight. Elias tensed, the king rising to protect what he had just claimed. Leora clutched Kai tighter, the night's serenity fracturing, leaving her on the precipice of a world where love demanded she confront the beast within and without. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The fire's embers glowed like dying stars in the cabin's hearth, casting flickering patterns on the walls that seemed to whisper of bonds forged in forgotten moons. Dawn broke slowly over the forest, painting the canopy in hues of crimson and gold. But Leora found no comfort in the light. Kai slept fitfully in a nest of blankets by the fire, his small form peaceful for the first time in months. Yet the revelation of his heritage weighed on her like chains of velvet and iron. She sat by the window, tracing patterns in the condensation, the glass cool against her fingertips, the world outside a blur of mist and ancient trees. Elias had vanished into the woods at first light, his parting words a promise of return, leaving her with the pack, a small group of shifters whose eyes held stories of loyalty and loss. Among them was Mira, a Dhampir healer with a strong, unspoken tie to Elias from centuries past. Her romance with the king had been a tempest of passion and parting, ending when she chose a mortal life to escape the shadows. Now, she watched Leora with quiet empathy, her presence a bridge between worlds. Leora's traumas resurfaced in the quiet hours, the disillusion of her marriage's collapse, the abandonment that left her to face Kai's illness alone. Desires for normalcy clashed with this new reality, a son who was part wolf, bound to an immortal king. She rationalized it as a fever dream, but the evidence was tactile. Kai's improved color, the faint scars on the pack member's arms that healed too swiftly. Elias returned as the sun climbed, carrying a basket of wild herbs, the scent of earth and pine clinging to him. His face was etched with the night's patrol, rival scents on the wind, threats to the pup. "They know of him," he said, voice low, the texture of gravel under boot echoing his tension. He knelt by Kai, the silver ring brushing the child's blanket, its thorned rose symbol evoking memories of his own losses. Introspection claimed them as they shared a simple meal, bread and cheese by the fire, the crackle of flames underscoring their words. Elias spoke of his origin, the Scottish clans, the choice to embrace eternity after his family's slaughter, the ethical burden of kingship. "Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die," he murmured, eyes distant. Leora shared her pains, the sensual ache of loneliness, the moral dilemma of loving a child who might outlive her in ways she couldn't fathom. Love stirred subtly, resisted in their glances, the way her hand lingered near his, the warmth of his presence chasing her chills. The cabin's atmosphere was gothic, with velvet drapes absorbing light, candles relit to ward off the encroaching dusk. As evening fell, Kai awoke with a start, his eyes shifting to amber, a partial transformation rippling through him. Pain contorted his features, bones protesting the change. Leora cried out, and Elias acted, drawing her into a ritual circle on the floor, marked with salt and moonlight filtering through the window. "Breathe with him," he instructed, his hands guiding hers, their touches electric, awakening dormant desires. In the revelation, Kai stabilized, the shift receding, but the intimacy bound Leora and Elias closer. She saw the light in his shadows, the redemptive king beneath the solitude. Yet as they held the child between them, a low growl sounded outside, closer now. Rivals approached, their intent clear, to claim the pup as weakness to exploit. Elias stood, resolve hardening his features, leaving Leora with a choice echoing in her soul: flee to safety or stand in this new eternity. The door creaked open to the night, the wind carrying whispers of danger, her heart torn between fear and the inevitable pull toward him. Moonlight spilled through the cabin's cracks like liquid silver, illuminating the thorned rose on the ring that now seemed to bind fates as surely as any chain. Night deepened, the forest alive with rustles and distant calls, a symphony of warning that set Leora's nerves alight. Kai dozed in her arms, his breathing steady, but the earlier partial shift lingered in her mind like a scar, visible, tender. The pack had retreated to the perimeter, leaving her alone with Elias, the air between them charged, thick with the scent of burning herbs and unspoken tensions. Leora paced the worn floorboards, their creak a counterpoint to her racing thoughts. At 32, her life had been a slow erosion, illness shadowing her youth, a loveless marriage crumbling under Kai's cries, abandonment carving hollows in her spirit. Desires flickered now, for healing, for connection beyond survival. Yet she resisted the man before her, rationalizing his world as peril wrapped in allure. Elias watched from the shadows, his immortal frame leaning against the mantel, the fire's glow tracing the lines of his face. Strong jaw, eyes like molten gold. Centuries of solitude had etched guilt into his soul. The Dhampir lover lost to her choice of mortality, Pax decimated by his hesitations. Ethical to a fault, he sought redemption in protecting the vulnerable, yet this human and her pup stirred a deeper longing to share eternity's burden, to transform curse into communion. He stepped closer, the space between them shrinking, textures vivid. The rough wool of his shirt brushing her arm, the slow rhythm of his breath syncing with hers. "You don't have to face this alone," he said, voice a velvet rumble, evoking the intimacy of confessions in ruined chapels. She turned, hazel eyes meeting his, the moral dilemma raw. "And what if I choose to walk away, leave your world of beasts and blood?" Love was no fairy tale. It was resisted, a slow burn that threatened her fragile control. The night outside intensified, wind howling like mournful wolves, rain pattering against the roof in a sensory assault. Elias revealed more, his ring's history, a symbol from his first love, a Dhampir whose romance taught him love's redemptive pain. "It reminds me that suffering can forge strength," he confessed, slipping it onto her finger temporarily, the metal cool, thorns pricking lightly, a ritual of trust. Introspection wove through their dialogue, philosophical musings on life's transience versus eternity's weight. Leora spoke of faith eroded by despair, Elias of despair tempered by choice. As thunder rolled, Kai stirred again, his body heating with fever, the wolf within demanding release. Elias guided her to the window, where moonlight bathed them. "Help him choose," he urged, their hands entwined over the child. In this revelation, Kai's eyes opened, calm washing over him, the bond strengthening. Leora's tears fell, hot on her cheeks, the embrace with Elias turning sensual yet chaste, bodies close, hearts aligning in tragic harmony. But joy fractured as snarls erupted nearby, rivals breaching the wards, their forms shadowy in the storm. Elias pulled away, kingly duty calling, leaving Leora clutching the ring, its thorns drawing a bead of blood. The choice loomed. Remove it and retreat to mortality's safety, or keep it and embrace the shadow's light. As the door burst open to chaos, her heart whispered the inevitable. Thunder cracked like the shattering of ancient vows as rain lashed the cabin walls, blurring the line between storm without and turmoil within. The rivals burst through the door, 3 hulking shifters with fur-matted hides and eyes burning with feral greed, outcasts from distant packs, drawn by rumors of a vulnerable heir. Elias met them head-on, his form shifting mid-stride to wolf, black fur gleaming wet under the flashes of lightning. The cabin devolved into chaos, overturned chairs splintering like bones, the fire scattering embers across the floor in sparks of red and gold. Leora backed against the wall, Kai clutched to her chest, his tiny form trembling not from illness, but instinctual fear. The air reeked of wet earth, blood, and musk. Sounds assaulting her senses, the snarls, the thud of bodies colliding, the rain's relentless drum. Her world, once confined to diner counters and hospital waits, exploded into this gothic fray, ruins of normalcy crumbling around her. Elias fought with ethical ferocity, claws raking without needless kills, his kingly code demanding mercy where possible. One rival lunged for Kai, but Leora swung a fallen candelabrum, its iron heavy in her grip, the impact drawing a yelp. Adrenaline surged, her broken spirit igniting in defense, abandonment forging resolve. The battle spilled outside, mud churning under paws, lightning illuminating the fray like cinematic strobes. Mira appeared from the trees, her Dhampir grace a blur, aiding Elias with strikes that blended vampire speed and wolf cunning. Their shared history flashed in Elias's mind, a romance of passion and pain, her choice to fade into mortality, leaving him wiser, lonelier. Leora followed, Kai in arms, the storm soaking her to the skin, textures vivid, cold rivulets tracing her spine, the metallic taste of fear on her tongue. She found Elias pinning the leader, golden eyes locking on hers. "Stay back," he growled, but she approached, the ring still on her finger, its thorn drawing blood that mingled with rain. In the eye of the storm, a revelation unfolded. The rival leader snarled of a greater threat, an ancient vampire lord, ally to outcasts, seeking shifter blood to bolster his eternal reign. Elias's pack was targeted, Kai the key. The moral choice crystallized for Leora: surrender the child to safety, or bind her fate to Elias's, embracing love's curse. Elias dispatched the foes with restraint, wounds healing swiftly under the moon. As silence fell, he shifted back, pulling Leora close, their embrace a haven amid the deluge. Kai reached for him, a soft whine bridging them. Intimacy bloomed, lips brushing in a kiss born of survival, sensual and profound, rationalized as necessity yet inevitable. The storm ebbed, leaving them drenched, the thorned rose ring now a shared talisman. But as they returned to the cabin, a raven circled overhead, its cry a harbinger. Whispers of the vampire lord's approach echoed in Elias's senses, the deathly shadow lengthening. Leora's heart raced. Had she chosen eternity's light, or invited its devouring dark? If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts. The raven's shadow lingered on the cabin roof long after the storm passed, a silhouette against the emerging stars, as if the night itself conspired to weave mortal and immortal threads tighter. Exhaustion settled over the group like a heavy cloak, the cabin's interior a testament to the fray. Splintered wood, smeared blood diluted by rain, the fire rekindled to ward off the chill. Leora sat by Kai, who slept soundly, his latent wolf essence stabilized by the night's trials. Her body ached, hands bruised from the candelabrum, but a new strength pulsed within, born of choice. The ring's thorn, a faint sting on her finger, symbolic of love's piercing beauty. Elias paced, his immortal vigor unyielding, guilt resurfacing. The rival's defeat was temporary, the vampire lord's shadow a deeper curse. Originating from Eastern European shadows centuries ago, this foe, a king among the undead, ethical in his solitude yet driven by possessive hunger, sought to merge bloodlines, claiming shifter pups like Kai for his Dhampir legions. Elias's traumas echoed, lost loves, including Mira's poignant farewell, teaching him that redemption lay in protection, not possession. Mira tended wounds nearby, her Dhampir eyes distant, the romance with Elias a ghost between them, strong, unyielding, ended by her fear of eternity's isolation. She nodded to Leora, a silent alliance forming. "You've awakened something in him," she said softly, voice like wind through velvet. Leora explored her dilemmas in the firelight, the flame's warmth contrasting the cold dread in her veins. Abandoned and desiludida, she had resisted this world, rationalizing Elias's pull as survival's illusion. Yet intimacy grew. His hand on her shoulder, steadying, evoking textures of safety, the rough calluses of his palm, the subtle scent of pine and blood. As midnight tolled, unseen through the window's frost, Elias shared philosophies, the beauty in human suffering, how mortality's brevity illuminated eternity's voids. Leora confessed desires to heal Kai, to love without loss, her voice sensual in vulnerability, the air humming with emotional depth. A ritual emerged organically. Under candlelight, Elias traced runes on Kai's skin with diluted blood from his own vein, a binding to suppress the vampire threat. Leora participated, her touch on the child mingling with Elias's, their fingers intertwining. Revelation struck. Kai's eyes glowed briefly, accepting the protection, his hybrid nature a bridge to peace. Love deepened. Inevitable. A kiss in the ritual's afterglow, slow and redemptive, bodies pressing with tragic passion, no vulgarity in the sensual dance of light and shadow. The cabin's gothic ambiance enveloped them, velvet cushions, moonlight on glass, sounds of crackling wood and slowing breaths. Yet as serenity bloomed, Mira burst in, raven in hand, a message etched in its claw. The vampire lord approached, demanding the pup. Elias's face darkened, the choice for Leora sharpening. Hide in human obscurity or stand with the king, transforming pain into eternal alliance. The raven took flight, leaving echoes of impending night, her soul teetering on the edge of transcendence. In the mirror above the cabin's hearth, reflections fractured like souls on the verge of union, capturing not just faces, but the infinite echoes of choices yet to be made, where every glance revealed the tangled vines of light and shadow entwined in the human heart. The days following the storm's fury blurred into a tense vigil, the forest's dense canopy weaving a protective veil against the unseen eyes that now prowled its edges. Leora moved through this newfound existence with a tentative grace, her human fragility yielding inch by inch to glimpses of an inner strength she had long forgotten. Kai, her fragile son, thrived under the pack's careful ministrations, his brittle bones mending with subtle infusions of shifter essence, drawn from herbs steeped in moonlight and whispered incantations by the fire. No longer confined to carriers and cautions, he toddled on unsteady legs through the cabin's shadowed corners, his laughter a rare, tinkling sound that pierced the heavy air like sunlight through stained glass. Yet Leora's heart remained a battlefield, her traumas resurfacing in the quiet hours, the disillusion of a life defined by relentless loss, the abandonment that had carved hollows in her spirit deeper than any physical wound. Desires for a semblance of normalcy clashed violently with the fear of this immortal curse, a world where love promised redemption, but whispered of eternal sorrow. The thorned rose ring, now worn constantly on her finger, served as a constant, pricking reminder, its metal cool against her skin, the engraved petals drawing faint beads of blood that she wiped away with trembling hands, each drop a testament to love's inseparable union with pain. Elias watched her from afar during these days, his immortal vigilance a silent guardian. He wandered the perimeter of their territory, senses attuned to the shifting winds that carried the vampire lord's insidious scent, ancient and metallic, like rust on forgotten iron. Born in the shadowed courts of medieval Eastern Europe, this undead sovereign had once been a nobleman who chose vampiric eternity not for glory, but to escape the agony of a mortal plague that claimed his family. Ethical in his profound solitude, he wandered centuries marked by a possessive hunger, seeking to merge bloodlines in a desperate bid for legacy. His Dhampir progeny, a twisted dream of immortality's purity. Elias's own guilt weighed heavier now. As Alpha King, he had evaded alliances with such creatures for lifetimes untold, his code of honor a bulwark against corruption. The Dhampir ties that bound him to Mira, her enduring romance with him, a fierce, unyielding flame that had burned through passion and partings, ending only when she embraced mortality to flee eternity's isolating embrace, complicated his heart further. Mira moved among the pack like a specter of grace, her half-vampiric eyes holding stories of loyalty forged in blood, now offering Leora quiet counsel by the hearth, their shared glances weaving an unspoken alliance across worlds. Leora sought solace in solitude, drawn inexorably to the ruins of an old chapel nestled deeper in the woods, its stone walls overgrown with ivy that clung like desperate fingers to crumbling mortar. The air there hung heavy with the scent of damp moss and faded incense, a Gothic sanctuary where sunlight filtered through fractured stained glass windows, casting crimson and gold patterns across the flagstone floor like spilled wine and molten amber. She knelt on a weathered pew, the wood rough and cool beneath her palms, tracing the faded carvings of saints whose eyes seemed to follow her with compassionate judgment. Here, in this relic of forgotten faith, her introspection deepened into a philosophical torrent. The beauty of human suffering, how mortality's brevity could illuminate the vast, echoing voids of eternity. The cruel dance of memory and forgetfulness, where every joy was laced with the foreknowledge of loss. Faith, once eroded by the relentless tide of Kai's illness and her husband's flight, flickered faintly now, tempered by despair, yet kindled by the possibility of transcendence. Elias found her there as dusk began to bleed into the sky, his approach silent as a shadow's glide, footsteps muffled on the lichen-covered ground that crunched softly under his boots, releasing puffs of earthy scent into the cooling air. He joined her on the pew without a word at first, his broad frame settling beside hers, the warmth of his body a stark contrast to the chapel's chill. The space between them hummed with unspoken tension, textures vivid and intimate, the subtle rustle of his leather jacket against the stone, the slow, rhythmic cadence of his breath syncing unconsciously with hers, the faint, wild musk of the forest clinging to his skin like a lover's perfume. Elias's golden eyes, deep as ancient wells, met hers, and in that gaze, he saw the war raging within, her resistance to the pull between them, rationalized as mere duty to Kai rather than the deeper, inevitable desire blooming in her soul. "Eternity is no gift without choice," he murmured finally, his voice echoing off the vaulted arches like a confession in a ruined cathedral, carrying the weight of centuries in its velvet timbre. They spoke then in cadenced rhythms, alternating revelations with stretches of profound silence, the air growing thicker with emotional depth. Leora confessed the sensual ache of her loneliness, the moral dilemmas that clawed at her nights, to bind herself to this world of beasts and blood, or retreat to the fragile safety of human obscurity, even if it meant watching Kai's wild nature consume him from within. Elias shared fragments of his own shadowed path, the Scottish highlands of his youth, the pack massacres that forced his hand into kingship, the ethical burdens of an immortal who had seen too many innocents fall to the shadows. As the sun dipped fully below the horizon, painting the chapel in hues of deep indigo and flickering torchlight from sconces they had lit earlier, the ritual of confrontation began to brew in the air like an impending storm. Elias rose, extending a hand, and Leora took it, their fingers intertwining with a spark that sent shivers racing along her spine, the roughness of his calluses against her softer skin evoking a sensual promise of protection and passion. He led her back through the twilight woods, where the pack had gathered around a central bonfire in a clearing ringed by ancient oaks, their branches twisting like arthritic fingers toward the emerging stars. Candles were arrayed in a wide circle on the mossy ground, their flames dancing in the breeze, casting elongated shadows that merged and separated like lovers in eternal pursuit. Kai sat at the circle's heart, His small form bathed in golden light, eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and latent fear. The symbolic thorned rose ring passed among the pack members in a chain of unity, each touch infusing it with their collective essence. Leora faced her moral crux then, standing at the circle's edge, the fire's heat warming her face while a deeper chill settled in her bones. The pack's chants rose, low and resonant like the distant thrum of heartbeats wrapped in velvet night, invoking ancient protections against the undead's grasp. To partake in the binding oath would pledge her alliance against the vampire lord, weaving her mortal thread into the immortal tapestry. To withdraw would preserve her humanity, but at the cost of abandoning the family she had only just begun to claim. Elias's eyes never left hers, a silent plea and promise in their depths. With a breath that trembled like leaves in wind, Leora stepped forward, her hand slipping into his once more, the ring transferred to her grasp as the chants swelled. Revelation cascaded through her in that moment. Visions of their shared future flashed unbidden. Love redeeming the deepest shadows, suffering birthing an unyielding strength, Kai growing into a bridge between worlds under their joint guardianship. The air shimmered with energy, textures overwhelming, the crackle of flames licking at the night, the earthy tang of smoldering sage, the subtle vibration of power humming through the ground into her veins. In the ritual's afterglow, as the chants faded to whispers, love deepened into its inevitable bloom. A kiss shared in the firelight, slow and profoundly redemptive, their bodies drawing close in an emotional intimacy that transcended the physical. Elias's lips met hers with a tenderness born of centuries' longing, his hands framing her face, thumbs tracing the contours of her cheeks with a sensual grace that spoke of tragic harmony rather than conquest. The chapel's distant ghosts seemed to bear witness, the wind sighing through the trees like a benediction, no vulgarity in the dance of light and shadow that enveloped them, only the pure, aching beauty of souls aligning. But harmony shattered as abruptly as a mirror's crack. From the tree line emerged the vampire lord himself, a figure cloaked in black velvet that absorbed the moonlight, his form tall and elegantly predatory, eyes gleaming like frozen rubies in the fire's glow. The air grew colder in his wake, carrying the faint, cloying scent of ancient crypts and withered roses, a harbinger of death's invisible presence made manifest. His voice slithered through the clearing like smoke. The pup is mine by ancient right, forged in the blood of pacts long sealed under forgotten moons. The pack tensed, growls rippling through their ranks, Elias stepping forward to shield Leora and Kai, his body a barrier of unyielding resolve. The standoff crackled with electric tension, claws extending from pack hands, fangs glinting in the Lord's smile, the wind rising to howl through the oaks like a chorus of damned souls. Leora's choice crystallized in that suspended breath, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, to fight for the eternity of love that saw her soul bare, or yield to despair's cold embrace and flee into the night. As the first shadows lunged forward and the bonfire roared higher, the mirror of their souls reflected a transformation irrevocably begun, leaving the night hanging in tragic, breathless possibility, the weight of worlds balanced on the edge of her next step. The chapel's bell tolled once, a solitary peal swallowed by the forest's profound hush, as if time itself had paused to witness the alchemy of mortal despair transmuting into immortal resolve, where every echo carried the promise of redemption woven from threads of shadow and light. The vampire lord advanced with deliberate elegance, his form cutting through the clearing like a blade through velvet night, his cape billowing behind him in undulating waves that mimicked the wings of some primordial bat. The air around him chilled to an unnatural frost, carrying the heavy, cloying scent of ancient crypts mingled with the desiccated perfume of withered roses long decayed in forgotten vases. His eyes, red as the deepest spill of forbidden wine, fixed unerringly on Kai, who huddled protectively behind Leora's skirts, the child's small form trembling not from his congenital frailty, but from an instinctual recognition of the predator's gaze. The pack formed a tight semicircle at the clearing's edge, their growls rumbling low and synchronized, a primal symphony that vibrated through the mossy ground and into Leora's bones. Textures assaulted the senses in this gothic tableau, the grit of stone and earth underfoot, slick with evening dew, the metallic tang of impending blood hanging sharp in the nostrils, moonlight glinting off extended claws and the Lord's bared fangs, casting elongated shadows that twisted like living entities across the bonfire's dying embers. Elias stood at the forefront, his Alpha King's stature a monolith of unyielding power, golden eyes blazing with an ethical fire tempered by centuries of guarded wisdom. The enmity between him and this undead sovereign stretched back through the annals of shadowed history. Born in the opulent yet decaying courts of medieval Eastern Europe, the Lord had once been a nobleman of refined cruelty, choosing vampiric eternity not for mere glory, but to evade the agonizing mortality of a plague that had stripped him of his entire lineage in a single fevered night. Ethical in his profound, self-imposed solitude, he had wandered the ages marked by a possessive hunger that bordered on madness, seeking to merge ancient bloodlines in a desperate quest for a legacy denied him by death's caprice. His Dhampir progeny, half-breeds born of coerced unions, represented a twisted dream of immortality's untainted purity, and now Kai's hybrid essence called to him like a siren's song. Elias's own guilt twisted deeper in this confrontation. The scars of past failures to protect his kin, the poignant romances with Dhampirs like Mira that had left him wiser yet eternally scarred, her enduring bond of fierce loyalty that now positioned her at his flank, her half-vampiric grace ready to strike. Mira's eyes, sharp as shattered obsidian, met Leora's briefly, a nod of solidarity passing between them, bridging the chasm of their shared histories with the king. Leora trembled at the epicenter of this maelstrom, yet she held her ground with a ferocity born of maternal fire. Kai's tiny hand clutched in hers, his fingers sticky with the nervous sweat of fear. The thorned rose ring on her finger pulsed with a warmth that seemed almost alive, infused now with the mingled blood of pack and ritual, its engraved petals drawing fresh beads that trickled down her skin like tears of commitment. Her journey from the broken waitress of a fog-shrouded diner to this precipice of worlds colliding had been a profound odyssey. Traumas of abandonment, father lost to addiction's haze, mother to indifferent remarriage, husband to the cowardice of fleeing cries, transmuted through the slow, inexorable siege of love. Desires that had once flickered dimly for Kai's healing and a whisper of personal joy now blazed into an unquenchable flame, overriding the terror that clawed at her throat. She resisted no longer. The inevitable pull toward Elias had become her deliberate choice, a redemption she claimed not despite the curse, but through its very thorns. The confrontation erupted into a sensory fury that engulfed the clearing, transforming the night into a cinematic whirlwind of gothic splendor and primal horror. The vampire lord struck first, his supernatural speed a blur of velvet and shadow, fangs extended like ivory daggers as he lunged toward Kai. Elias met him mid-air, shifting seamlessly into his wolf form, massive black fur rippling over corded muscles, jaws snapping with centuries-honed precision. The clash resounded like thunder cracking ancient oaks, bodies colliding with bone-jarring force, claws rending flesh that knit and tore in equal measure. The pack surged forward, their forms a kaleidoscope of fur and fang under the moon's indifferent gaze. Mira flanked Elias with Dhampir agility, her movements a lethal ballet blending vampiric swiftness and wolfish cunning, their old romance fueling a synchronized ferocity that turned the tide against the Lord's illusory minions, shadowy thralls summoned from the underbrush, their eyes glowing with undead hunger. Leora, shielding Kai in the shadowed alcove of the nearby chapel ruins, whispered encouragements into his ear, her voice a steady beacon amid the chaos. Tales of strength drawn from her own fractured past, promises of a family unbroken by the night's devouring dark. The air thrummed with visceral intensity, the wet rip of claws through undead flesh, the acrid smoke of ichor sizzling on the bonfire's remnants, the relentless howl of wind whipping through the trees like the wails of damned spectators. In the melee's throbbing heart, Elias pinned the Lord against a gnarled oak, their duel as philosophical as it was physical, blows exchanged with taunts that cut deeper than any blade. Love chooses life, not domination. Elias roared through bared teeth, his claws rending the vampire's velvet cape and drawing rivulets of black ichor that smoked and hissed upon the ground, filling the air with a bitter, sulphurous stench. The Lord laughed, a sound like shattering crystal, his ruby eyes flashing with desperate cunning. Eternity devours the weak. Your pup will thrive in my shadows, redeemed from mortal frailty. But Elias's resolve held, his ethical code a fortress. No needless slaughter, only the mercy of retreat or defeat. Revelation peaked in a cascade of transcendent light as Leora, unable to stand idle, emerged from the alcove with Kai at her side. The child's partial shift manifested in that crucible, a tiny wolf form, disabled yet fiercely determined, his fur a soft silver gray that shimmered under the moon, bones holding miraculously against the strain as he lunged forward with a yip of defiance, nipping at the Lord's retreating ankle. The sight shattered the vampire's composure, his ancient claim fracturing under the undeniable bond of blood and choice, the pup's innate allegiance to his alpha father king, a living rebuke to the undead's barren ambitions. Defeated and howling in frustrated eternity, the Lord dissolved into swirling mist, retreating into the forest's depths, his parting curse echoing like fading thunder. A vow of shadows yet to come, but for now, vanquished. Silence descended upon the clearing like a benediction. The pack's victorious pants mingling with the soft patter of settling dew, wounds knitting swiftly under the moon's healing gaze. Elias shifted back to human form, his chest heaving, sweat and blood tracing rivulets down his skin, and pulled Leora into his arms with Kai cradled between them. The embrace became a ritual of rebirth, bodies pressing close in the afterglow of survival. The textures intimate and profound, the rough weave of his shirt against her uniform's faded cotton, the shared rhythm of hearts pounding in unison, the faint, salty taste of tears mingling with the metallic hint of blood. Love consummated in tender intimacy, a kiss that deepened slowly, lips exploring with sensual grace, evoking the tragic passion of souls long starved. No death claimed in this union, only the transformative fire of chosen eternity. Their hands intertwined over Kai, who nuzzled contentedly, his wolf form receding to reveal the boy's peaceful face, the family's bond sealed in the night's quiet surrender. As dawn crested the horizon, gilding the ruins and the weary pack in warm golden light that chased away the lingering shadows, Leora whispered her final choice into Elias's ear, her voice a caress soft as morning mist. To walk eternity's path alongside him, not as wolf or vampire, but as equal partner in this redemptive odyssey, her mortality a light to illuminate his endless vigil. The thorned rose ring, passed once more, was placed permanently on her finger, its symbol now etched into their shared fate, suffering's beauty blooming eternal. The forest sighed in quiet approval, leaves rustling like applause, death's invisible shadow receding into memory. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die, and now, so had she, irrevocably changing the Alpha King's life forever in waves of tragic, redemptive love that promised to echo through the ages. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned.